Perhaps you've heard the phrase, or maybe even said it in your work environment or your team. It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. I know I've worked in places where the bureaucratic red tape, for lack of a better definition, the process that you had to go through to get approval for anything, to release funds for a marketing campaign, to change the R&D process of a given product, to change your audience or market of the product that you're offering. All of those processes take so much time because they involve so many people, and one minor change in your view impacts a plethora of other people and their process and the product that they develop and the merchandise that they buy to develop that product and the marketplace that they take it to, and even something as simple as a training course. Changing one statement in that training course means perhaps a new mindset for everyone who's training that course, perhaps a new way of understanding for everyone who's received that course in the past, or whose follow-on courses will be altered in their meaning or application by that one phrase. But at minimum, anything that's been printed with that phrase now has to be changed. Anything that's been published on a website or a blog or a video log, anything like that. Getting permission ahead of time is designed to minimize those types of risks and exposure, and also to ensure that alignment with the end result, alignment with the final idea is going to be successful. Now, honestly, there are those times that the process itself is designed to thwart changes. It's designed to be almost tyrannical or totalitarian. The dictator who put these processes in place cannot be altered. It must be like this, because to change it means I didn't think of something, or I missed something, or I have to do more work, and I'm not going to do that. There are those places where changing it means someone has to admit they were wrong, and humans don't like doing that. But for us to make the changes in post, if you will, that forgiveness rather than permission, that I'm going to do it anyway and expect that in the end it will all work out. In the end, it will work itself out. In the end, people will accept the change that I've made without permission. People will accept and maybe even appreciate the change, the decision, the course alteration that I chose without discussion. Have you found yourself at that place, whether it's in your job or your family, your marriage relationship, your educational career, that you've made a choice along the way that seems to you to be the best choice, without regard for whatever was decided before, without regard for any choices that you've made before, such as a mortgage payment and a commitment to make that payment on that date, but you missed? What kind of changes have you missed or made over the course of your life that you now have to undo because you didn't do them right to start with? You didn't have all of your decision-making faculty when you made the first commitment, and so now you're changing your commitment. Is it still easier to get forgiveness than permission? Is it easier then to miss a few car payments rather than refinance the car or sell it? These are the kinds of questions that I believe we need to ask and answer as leaders as we chart the course for the team that's following us. Again, whether it's a family, a government structure, a corporation, a small work team. When we as leaders make decisions that are going to impact others immediately around us and for generations perhaps to come, we need to understand the difference between forgiveness and permission. As we discussed last week, I believe the rules and regulations, the laws of obedience that God has put in place for the universe, for all humankind, They're not specific to a religion. God didn't have religion in mind when he laid out the rules of the universe. God wasn't thinking, I will make them behave in a specific way. God was thinking, as is evident by Scripture, that there are those things which will benefit you in life if you understand how they work and why we do them the way we do. And there are those things that if you continue to do them incorrectly, against the laws of nature, against what God expects of you, there will be a high price to pay. I had a client a few years ago who fired me and eventually hired me back. But when she fired me, our follow-up conversation, she said, but I felt like this. And I said, okay. She said, you're okay with that? I said, it's your feeling. It's not my choice how you feel. It's also not my consequence how you feel. She said, but you agree I have the right to my feelings. I said, of course you do. You get to choose how you feel about any given moment. In fact, what we call an attitude, by clinical definition, according to Dr. Caroline Leaf, neuroscientist, attitude is a thought and the way you choose to feel about that thought. So thought plus feeling equals attitude. If a thought comes to your mind and you choose to be upset about it, or you choose to be joyous about it, or you choose to let it go and let it have no consequences in your life, any one of those three options, and there are many more, any one of those three options are your choice. Also understand that whatever consequence is caused by that choice is yours. Do I have the right to feel this way? Of course you do. And if that causes you panic attacks and sleepless nights and ulcers, and as the scripture says, the fear that someone is pursuing you when no one is, the fear that you will plant your seed and it will bear no fruit, or when it does bear fruit, someone else will eat it. If those consequences are the result of your choices, then the price that you pay is yours. You have a right to your feelings. You also have a right to walk out in the parking lot and throw a hammer in the air. And if you choose not to move, eventually that hammer is going to come down on your head. And the consequences, i.e. the pain of a hammer smashing into your head, will be consequences that you have chosen by your action. The action of throwing the hammer in the air, the inaction of getting out of its way. Your pain, your consequences from your choices. Permission or forgiveness? Well, you can ask the laws of the universe in advance not to allow gravity to impact your hammer at that moment. You might feel a little silly. You might even wait until the hammer smashes into your head and then ask gravity forgive you for throwing it in the air. I don't think gravity cares at this point. But in that moment, you will realize that the laws of the universe have already been set in motion. And neither you're pleading against them nor you're begging for forgiveness for their actions will change anything. And so now we come back to the original question. Is it better to gain permission or beg for forgiveness? And I think there may be a higher writing answer. And that is, permission has already been granted. You have the right to do. Paul said it like this: all things are permissible. Not all of them are beneficial. Throwing a hammer in the air is permissible. There's no law in Scripture that says don't throw a hammer in the air. It's fine if you want to throw a hammer in the air. But understand, if it comes down on your head, or the head of a loved one, or the head of an absolute stranger, there will be a price to be paid, either in immediate pain or in legal consequences for hitting someone else in the head with a hammer. You are free to throw a hammer in the air, but you are not free from the consequences of the choice. Can you get someone else's permission to cause harm in such a way? Well, perhaps. But does that mean they have the authority? Can they override the law of gravity to allow you to make this choice without recompense or without consequences? Probably not. So we come back again to the place of asking, why does God have these rules in place? Why are the consequences of disobedience so significant? And how many times have we found ourselves in the place where we think to ourselves, I don't think anyone will know that I've done this. I don't think anyone will know that I made this choice. I don't think anyone will know that I have decided to act in this way. Until after it's all said and done and the consequences have come and they find out that I was right to begin with. And as we find ourselves in that place, we still have to ask the question, are there rules, are there laws that are outside of those from whom we might get permission that will bring consequences that they can't even perceive? In the remaining verses here, I'm just going to go through these real quick. I believe we were at 35. As long as it lies desolate, the land shall rest. And then he goes through this same reminder again. He says, as for those of you who are left, I will send faintness into your hearts. This is Leviticus 26:36. I will send faintness into your heart, into their hearts, in the lands of their enemies. The sound of a shaken leaf will cause them to flee. They shall flee as though fleeing from the sword, and they shall fall when no one pursues them. They will stumble over one another as if it were before a sword when no one pursues. You shall perish among the nations, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And those of you who are left shall waste away in their iniquity in the enemy's lands, and also in their fathers' iniquities, which are with them, they shall waste away. My promise to you was that as we've reviewed these negative rewards, if you will, these consequences of chosen disobedience, that we would also look at 16 things that God promises when we are obedient. So we're going to jump back in Leviticus chapter 26 to let's see here. Let's talk about the restoration first. No, let's talk about obedience. He says in verse 21 of chapter 26, he says, you shall not make idols for yourself, neither a carved image or a sacred pillar shall you rear up for yourselves, nor shall you set up an engraved stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. You will keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. Now, in this passage, those are the basic commands of requirement. Don't set up anything else to be your God. Don't build statues to yourself or to some other God. Don't carve things in stone and say, that's my God. Just worship Yahweh. Then he says, you'll keep my Sabbaths. Take that day of rest to focus on me. Stop laboring, stop working, stop fretting, stop stressing. Just take some time to be alone with me. And to reverence my sanctuary, the place where the presence of God dwells. Now, in verse 3, he says, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and perform them, then. It's a powerful understanding to realize that much of the reward that we receive from God, his love is unconditional, but much of the love that we receive from God is conditional. If, then. The if is a choice. If you disobey my commands, we've already talked about those, right? 41 different consequences that we will pay the price of for disobedience. But if you choose to obey my commands, if you walk in my statutes, if you listen to what I'm telling you, you're probably not going to stand in the parking lot and throw a hammer in the air because the law of gravity is hard to override. There's a price to be paid for your foolishness, but if you keep my commands, if you do what I'm telling you, all these things that are already set in motion on earth are going to work so much better. If you don't drive like an idiot, the chances are your driving record will stay clean and your insurance rates will stay low. If you drive like an idiot, the chances are imminent that you're going to get caught, your insurance is going to go up because your driving record is bad, and there's a good chance you're going to have an accident and hurt yourself or someone else. And the cost of that behavior is significant. The reward, you see them now if you watch television in America, there are insurance companies that will write you a check for good driver. If you have no accidents, you have no tickets, you've been with the insurance company for a while, you'll actually get a check from the insurance company for being a good, safe driver and driving in a normal, sane way. That's pretty awesome. Doesn't happen for everybody, but it's pretty awesome. When you walk in my statutes, keep my commandments, perform them, then I will give rain in its season. The land will yield its produce, and the trees of the field their fruit. Now remember, one of the first things God says, if you are disobedient, the heavens will become like iron and the ground like bronze. Your ability just to produce for yourself daily needs will be cut off as a result of disobedience. Right here he's saying the first reward of obedience, the first reward of keeping the commandments of God, is that whatever you do will bear harvest. The land will produce its crops. The trees will produce their fruit. The heavens will send rain. Otherwise, you plant seeds and nothing happens, right? If the ground won't give up the food, if the trees won't give up the fruit, if the rain won't come from the heavens, what good is your planting? Your threshing shall last till the time of the vintage, and the vintage shall last till the time of the sowing. What he's saying is that the cycle of your produce won't be as drastically seasonal as it has been for many people. Great times of rise of profits and rise of success and rise of production. And then a giant slump. And then we stay in this cycle for 2 or 3 or 5 or 25 years. Some people in the 20s and 30s during the time of the Great Depression in America, they killed themselves because they had this season of high and they made a lot of money and it was all in the bank, and then the banks locked the doors and said, sorry, we can't give you your money. And they jumped off of buildings. They saw their net worth, their material value diminish, and they committed suicide. They didn't want to ride out the storm. They didn't want to live through the negative seasons of life to see another positive season. What God promised here in the act of obedience is that from the time that you plant your seed, and it goes through that cycle of the planting and the caring for the garden and the fields and the crops until the time of the harvest, and then you begin to store it. Well, there's a season there that you're hungry, now you got plenty of food. For many people, that plenty of food runs out long before the process starts again to plant and to care for the food and to harvest the food and to make it into food. And then they get to eat well and then they're hungry again for a season. God's promise here is that the time between your harvest and your next harvest will be nonstop. There will be a season that everything is blooming, and there will be a season that never ends. From the time that you plant it until the time that you plant again, there will be fruit, there will be food, there will be ongoing success. All of your profits will continue to rise and rise and rise. All of your success, all of your production will continue in a cyclical manner, just repeating itself again and again, but in overlapping circles, so that you see your plant, you see your crop, you see your harvest, you see your storing up of grain. And while you're storing grain, it's time to plant again. While you're still keeping up with everything that you've harvested, there's an opportunity to start again. The vintage shall last till the time of sowing, and you shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in the land safely. Not only are you going to be able to plant and nurture and harvest and store and plant again while you're storing, but no one's going to come try to steal it from you. You'll have so much that you can take care of yourself and people around you, and no one's going to try to steal it from you. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none will make you afraid. I will rid the land of evil beasts, and the sword will not go through your land. You will chase your enemies, and they shall fall by the sword before you. I'm going to come back tomorrow and talk about these other 11 ideas. Here's what I want to leave with you today. I want you to understand that, yes, we can proceed in life knowing that life is not fatalistic. God has not predetermined our success or failure. God has not said, you will not succeed in this land, I promise it. What God has said is that you have a choice to obey and work within the laws that I've put in place, or to abandon them. You have the choice to surrender yourself to my commandments or to fight against them. And the choice is yours. And the reward for the choice also yours. You have the ability to choose to obey God. Do you have to ask for permission to obey God? No. Do you have to ask whether or not gravity will work for you? No. The laws of the universe, which God has already set in motion, will continue regardless of what you ask of them. Learning to work within them, learning to work with those laws, that's a powerful thing. That's a powerful, positive opportunity for all of us to surrender ourselves to the laws of the universe that God has already put in place and to operate within them while honoring and obeying Him, allowing Him to be responsible for our produce, allowing Him to be responsible for our crops, allowing Him to bring the rain, to bring the safety, to stop the sword of our enemy. It's when we try to do all of those things on our own that we then need to ask for forgiveness because we didn't surrender. We tried to be God. If you like what you see here on this channel, I challenge you to subscribe right here on Facebook Live or YouTube live stream. I do this program every morning at 6:20 Central Time. I was a little late this morning, but I'd love to see you click the subscribe button down there and to share it with your friends. Also love to see your comments on Facebook and on YouTube. I am J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.